Narration is the oldest form of storytelling. Before we had anime, shows, movies, plays, even written text, we told stories, hence storytelling. In more modern media, narration has spanned genre and medium, from omniscient, disembodied voices to the inner workings of the protagonist. Often it's recorded voiceover, but sometimes it's breaking the fourth wall. Narration can be rooted in realism, a character telling their story in retrospect, or it can be completely ungrounded, a third-party observer experiencing the story alongside the viewer, a character that's never named outside of their role. They can provide insight unknown to the audience or guide them. There are tons of ways to use a narrator, but lately it feels like narration's disappeared. And I'll be honest, I was one of the first to welcome it. Corny narration can completely derail a story, but when it's subversive or used tastefully, I think narration can be a huge plus to stories. And I think it's time to bring it back. Welcome to this week's video. My name is Pei, and today we're making the case for narration. If you really think about it, narration is often placed in stories in a way that makes no sense. It's this meta, fourth wall breaking acknowledgement that the audience is experiencing a story where a narrator is directly acknowledging them, often placed in pieces of media with complete sincerity, no satire or self-awareness involved. This tool can only exist, it feels like, because it's so familiar to audiences. If you took away people's understanding of narration, it would actually be pretty jarring to experience otherwise. Like, who the hell is this disembodied voice explaining important moments of the story? This is also kind of covered by the fact that sometimes there is practical reasons for a narrator that are eventually revealed. Like, how many times do we have narration in a story and then later on we find out who the character is that's narrating? But just as often, there's no practical explanation. Out of context, narration is a tool that feels pretty weird to me, yet it's so prevalent, or at least it was, because I feel like narration over the last 10 to 15 years has become significantly less common. Now, it hasn't completely disappeared, and the examples we're talking about today are relatively modern ones. To me, it feels like the use of narration is kind of pendulumed away, and as it's kind of swinging back, I think there's two specific ways it should be used more. Narration is a fantastic tool for comedy and satire. Being able to speak directly to an audience and having an opportunity to acknowledge the often ridiculous situations characters find themselves in comedies can be used to great effect, and there's a perfect example of that. Essentially, the first way I'd like to see narration used more is subversively. If my long series on Frieren and Dungeon Meshi have taught me anything, it's that I'm not necessarily tired of old tropes as much waiting for someone to come along and use them in new, exciting ways. This is especially true given that narration has become less oversaturated. There's room for someone to step in and do something really cool. But the second way I'd like to see narration utilized more is tastefully. There's kind of this bias and tendency when making videos like this to highlight the things that stand out. I tend to talk about use cases that are more overt, but subtlety should be praised too. Sometimes stories use narration in a way that largely goes unnoticed, but still consistently has a positive impact on the story. Now, before we dive any further into that, let's look at our two examples. Kaguya-sama Love is War is an obvious frontrunner when it comes to being an example of modern use of narration in anime. The narrator is almost as much a primary character as the main cast. This middle-aged man being deeply emotionally invested in this high school romance as a narrator alongside the audience is really fun and used to great effect. The serious delivery and tone works really well, especially given the story's comedic roots. Juxtaposing that tone and his investment is part of what makes him such a compelling character. Plus, as someone who watched this show as a young adult, now approaching a middle-aged man, I think that it really feels on the nose. He's just like me for real. I do find myself incredibly invested in the nostalgia of this love story. The same love I feel for the characters is highlighted beautifully by the narrator. And there is even occasionally a softness in the way he talks about situations that really demonstrates the feelings I experience as the story evolves. Kaguya-sama very obviously wouldn't be the same without its narrator, and that's showcased really beautifully in the most recent movie, where he's given this incredibly important monologue, a variation of the way every episode starts, that explores the themes of the story beautifully. I made a whole hour-long video essay talking about Kaguya-sama where I pointed specifically at this scene because I really love the writing. I'm working on another script where I'm talking about why anime has so few stories take place in college, and one of the theories I have is because a lot of people can relate to high school, either in currently experiencing it or looking back at it nostalgically. And Kaguya-sama Love is War is built around that experience, explored beautifully with the use of narration in a way I've never really seen before, functioning as a fundamental part of why the show works at all. So let's ask an important question for this video. What's the point of narration? How is it used as a tool? In its simplest form, narration is used by writers to talk directly to the audience. Most commonly, it provides clarity by highlighting important parts of the plot, clearly stating characters' thoughts or experiences, and bringing attention to and emphasizing themes. The second example of narration in today's video is almost the inverse of what we explored in Kaguya-sama Love is War. Sometimes tools are used sparingly, to the point where if you were asked, does Dungeon Meshi have a narrator? It might take you a second to recall. But the answer is yes, and it's actually a very important part of the story. Outside of the first episode, where narration is used as an introduction, Dungeon Meshi specifically uses its narrator in its outros. I went back and transcribed all of the narrator's monologues, and I found that actually just 10 of the 24 episodes use them. Where the narrator plays a substantial part of Kaguya-sama Love is War's storytelling structure, in Dungeon Meshi it's not nearly as common, but it's still incredibly effective. Sometimes the narrator's providing simple insight, like in episode 7 when it explains the pain Laios is feeling having eaten a parasite. But at other times, these outros from the narrator lend themselves to poeticism. Like the first and last episode's monologues actually parallel one another, obviously setting the tone for exploring the themes within the story. And part of what makes it so cool is these similar monologues have very different meanings before and after having experienced the story. Let me read the narration transcript from the first episode. Dungeon food. Eat or be eaten. There is no hierarchy to it, just the reality that to eat is the privilege of the living. Oh, dungeon food, delicious in dungeon. And in Japanese, there's this kind of great delivery, repeating Dungeon Meshi twice, showcasing there's multiple meanings to the phrase. It can be interpreted as dungeon food, dungeon delicacies, and finally the title of the show, delicious in dungeon. Dungeon Meshi not only explores its themes well, it also finds new ways to kind of dive into this idea of sustenance, treating the experience of presence, a kind of philosophical thing, as a privilege of the living. To be really in the moment experiencing something so profound like having a great meal when you're exhausted, taking a warm shower after a long day. We can all kind of relate to that intense feeling. But it doesn't stop there. No living creature is above consumption, the life cycle, the whole Lion King circle of life thing. The lions eat the elks eat the grass, and the lions die and turn into the grass. Despite there being a clear list of apex predators within an ecosystem, no one escapes that cycle of consumption. These themes are all kind of explored really deeply in the show that at first seems like it's mostly a comedy. And the narrator's kind of melodramatic exploration of those themes is really interesting, left in these brief little ending monologues that don't even fill half of the episodes. It's a small role, but an important one, used very tastefully. In thinking a lot about narration, and specifically having a conversation with one of my roommates, he pointed out how storytelling is such a human experience. Obviously, earlier I talked about how oral histories and spoken words are the oldest form of storytelling. Not only is that the case, it's also kind of a universal experience. Growing up, I had the privilege to have parents who read me stories. But friends and coworkers do it too, sharing experiences around a water cooler, laughing over something that happened the other day. Comedians build entire careers around telling fake stories that just happen to touch on something that feels very real. I think being told a story falls into that very special category of being a universal experience, an essential component of the human condition. And there's something really cool about that. Because I think narration is a tool that's very weird in a vacuum, but it does tap into something that's very innate. That's why when it's done well, it can be accepted so quickly. It can make a story really great. So cheers to fantastic narration, and here's to hoping it makes a comeback.